પછી લિમિટ સુધરાવી બીજે દિવસે ટોટલ 400 કરોડની બીજી લાયબિલિટી મોકલી દીધી ક્લાયન્ટ્સ પછી તે ડિસાઇડેડ કે હવે પાછી ટાઈમિંગ વધારે દેવા.
Bhai, welcome. Pandaji, welcome to the webinar. Pandaji. Yes. કેમ છો પ્રશાંતભાઈ?
Yes, કેમ છો? બસ મજામાં પરાગભાઈ, કેમ છો?
બસ એકદમ મજામાં. જો I think all are here on dot અને
પ્રશાંતભાઈ all well?
Yes, always. રામભાઈ, પરાક્રમ કેમ છો? Good evening.
સાહેબનું માઇક મ્યુટ ઉપર વયું ગયું.
અચ્છા.
પ્રશાંતભાઈ, good evening. ચેતન કોઠારી here.
Yes. કેમ છો ચેતનભાઈ? Good evening.
Good evening. Welcome to this platform.
Yeah, thank you.
forum. Should we start?
Yes, we can. Good evening, one and all present here. I would request our respected chairman Chetan Kothari sir to formally welcome all of us and start the session.
Good evening, everybody. On behalf of Rajkot Management Association, I welcome our wonderful speakers of today's wonderful seminar, Mr. Parakramsinh Jadeja, Mr. Prashant Parsana, Mr. Barchha, and Mr. Panda. In fact, I am happily, introducing you. There are 3 P into this panel of 4 people, and Ram is, eternal kind of a thing. So it is really very heartening to welcome these wonderful personalities across India. They are very well-known figures of trade and industry. And there are wonderful intakes, which probably we will be, discussing this evening with a session for question and answer at the end of, moderated by our president, Parag by Jobanputra. Again, he also holds a P letter into this. So the panel is full of P. That is a power-packed session which we are going to have. And there is a small intake in case of everybody who want to ask a question. Please put on a chat box. It will be moderated by our CEO of Forum, and subsequently it will be sent to Parag Bhai, and Parag Bhai will pose the question. In today's seminar, probably what we are understanding or what we have seen in the last decade, there are 3 taking important points. First is the constant reduction of interest rates. All the panelists are probably mastering to this, but these are the 3 points which probably I feel like worth discussing and starting as a rolling of this seminar. The constant reduction of interest rate shows 2 parts. The first part is rich become richer and the poor become poorer. And the third one is we are shifting gradually from life of empty to life of plenty. So n number of products, n number of challenges, n number of infrastructure, which last decade has given us. There are challenges and there are also achievements. I introduce Parakramsinh Jadeja, who is, symbol of achievement in Rajkot. So I request Parakramsinh to please start and set the mood. Thank you.
I'll just mention the flow of the session. First 10 minutes would be given to each speaker for the monologue, and then 1 hour panel discussion will be there, and each monologue will be preceded by 1 introduction, small introduction. So first we have Darshana Ben to formally introduce Parakramsinh and welcome all.
Good evening, everyone. I hope my voice is audible.
Yes, audible.
Good evening to one and all present here. I'm Dr. Darshana Vatlani, a proud RMA member, an academician, researcher, and HRD professional. And it gives me immense pleasure and pride to introduce Mr. Parakramsinh Jadeja as our first keynote speaker for our program on economic lessons from last decade. As a businessman, he has earned the name and the fame with his work, the business offerings, being Asian #1 CNC machine supplier, dealing with various capital goods under Jyoti CNC Automation Private Limited. Yet, he is always discussed and remembered for his unique persona, enriched with high values and ideology, his people skills, ethical leadership that has transformed and touched life of his people and has been instrumental in addressing various socio-economic dynamics of the current corporate world. As an academician like me takes him as an ideal example in the class to reflect what can a visionary leader do even at the verge of the challenging times and accommodate his resources to drive through some larger causes. Yes, the Project Daman, his noble initiative, which has not only met his socio-ethical obligation but brought a lot of pride to each of us. This initiative counts for utmost appreciation and acknowledgement. We are glad to invite Mr. Parakramsinh Jadeja, founder of Jyoti CNC Automation Private Limited, a man with great insight and achievement and yet grounded with the roots. Sir, we request you to address each of us with your vast knowledge and experience. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Darshana ji. Thank you, Parag bhai and all Chetan bhai and RMA team. And let's say thank you to all other my colleagues also is Ram bhai and the entire team over here. Basically આજનો જે topic છે I would like to focus only on this near to this topic. That is a economic lesson from last decades. I'm in this, let's say in terms of my personal journey, as in professionals, I have completed 32 years. I started my career at age of 19. So, 32 વર્ષના experience, my last 10 years is completely a different experience. I felt that. Particularly after the 2008, the global crisis, and on the same time, even we ventured out into a acquisition of the company in a European company. So in the last 10 years nutshell, I would like to say that it's really I think everybody has heard the one terminology called as a VUCA word. And really we all are experiencing today is what called as a VUCA. And I would like to talk to on this, the great lessons what we have learned in this last decade. This word is really a great example of a VUCA word. So everybody knows about the VUCA word, but there are a lot of now today all entrepreneurs in a dilemma of a VUCA word. So let's say I would like to clarify it more into this VUCA word. So,
on your projects, you can publish your open source projects and source code.
V stands for, let's say, volatility. So if you look at that, the volatility, let's say just Rambhai was talking just now, કે ભાઈ global commodity prices છે જે એ કેવા ups and downs થાય છે એમને. I think nobody has thought about that ke petrol prices has gone minus. Okay. Same way, the stock market indices, foreign exchange fluctuation, the volatility તમે જુઓ એક દિવસ one day you will see the dollar has to be a X and to dollar has to be a ક્યાં જઈને ઊભું રહે છે. High risk associated with the failures. There is a lot of volatilities are there. Disruptive innovation, and a media chaos. I have experienced this all. Finally, a media chaos kevo hoy, that also I am experiencing personally since last couple of months. Okay. So these are all we called as a volatility. Then the second word is called as a U for uncertainty. Let's say there are many factors for a decisions. Decision factor has increased a lot. How the monsoon good in this year? Let's say this is also a decision factor today's world. Okay. Have a monsoon is a nature cycle, but all of our business today, all of the cycle, and particularly in India, it is also there are so much of uncertainty, and that is driving our businesses today. All parameters are moving targets. Goal post છે ને જે everyday goal post ફરે છે. It's a moving targets. Demand shift. Every day there is a question. Well, EU will sustain. China will sustain. So these are all our uncertainties are there. What will be the bank loan scenario after COVID? If you look at that today's scenario, so what a great uncertainties are there. And many facts may be unknown or hidden. તમને રોજ એમ થાય કે હજી શું નીકળશે છે. Confused thinking. રોજ આપણી thinking pattern માં છે ને જે સાંજે ઘરે પહોંચીને ત્યાં સુધીમાં confuse કરી દઈએ કે આપણે ભાઈ શું situation માં છીએ. So these are the all uncertainties. That is this VUCA word, U stands for this. C for a complex, less clarity about the future. Kaal શું થશે? No one knows us today. Business model. કેવું business model રાખવું તમને? કયા business model ને follow કરવું? There are a lot of complex business model has been come over here. There are a lot of economic analysis. There is a complexities are there. Excessive data and informations. એટલી બધી ડેટાની અવેલેબિલિટી છે, કોમ્પ્લેક્સિટી એને કારણે પણ બહુ વધારે છે. E-commerce for a B2B products. તમે જો તમે આજે તો માર્કેટની અંદર is a different drivers are coming in this kind of complexities are there. Last word છે જે ambiguous છે જે. There may be no right answer for this. કોઈ ambiguities છે આના માટે. Can't see beyond the one quarter. Long-term planning is ambiguous. Weak communication down the line. Rose down the line communications ni andar tamari ambiguity re because you are into dilemma. Fuzzy focus, every day there are something else. Regulatory framework. એક દિવસ છે ને ગવર્મેન્ટ પોલિસી X હોય, બીજે દિવસે ઈ તો જે ઓટોમોબાઈલ ઇન્ડસ્ટ્રીઝ છે કે એને જે લોકોએ બી આપણે જોયા છે ને many impacts we have seen in terms of a GST change and many others there. Okay. Non-committal attitude. Okay. So impact of a social media on a business. ન્યૂઝપેપર ની બારે એક સોશિયલ મીડિયા છે જે એ આજે તમારે બિઝનેસ ને એવું ડ્રાઈવ કરતું લઈ જાય. That is making a ambiguous over here. Everybody is having a one questions in the last 10 years. Should I invest? And this is what I call as a VUCA word. આમે example આપ્યું કે VUCA word વિશે. But a new normal, what I learned about from this crux of a VUCA word, the new normal for leadership. And I have given this a VUCA word into a 4 different word. Let's say against the volatility, we need to focus on to vision. if our vision is clear, the volatility will not allow us to move. U for, let's say, uncertainty. If our understanding is much better, stop, look, listen, learn, think local, act global versus think global, act local. જો આ understanding છે જે એની આપણને clarity હોય, then we are able to sustain this uncertainty we experience in this last journey of a decade. Clarity against the complexity. Make sense of a chaos. If we have a sense of a chaos also and clarity are there, so any complexity we can address them. And against the ambiguity, I made called as agility. જેટલા આપણે agile હસુ, જેટલા આપણે fragile હસુ, that much flexibility we are able to, and that's our answer. I feel it to this VUCA word. There are a lot of waves where that we need to catch, that I have identified that shift of alternate and renewable energies. આજે આપણે જોયું, તમે બધાને ખ્યાલ હશે કે નરેન્દ્ર મોદી આજે ડિક્લેર કર્યું કે we'll have a 240 gigawatt in the next 3 years, from 134 to a 200. And so these are the catchy waves that can be catched. Demographic dividend or a growth of a middle class is, we all are seeing that. So that's the waves. Infrastructures after COVID, and not after COVID, even the last 10 years, the steps of governments are taking is towards to more and more in terms of infrastructures. So that definitely we can look at over there. Defense contracting, there are a lot of defense contracting in Make in India is coming. If you look at that, India's budget of a defense is 3 lakhs crore. Out of these 3 lakhs crore, 1,60,000 crores that India is importing. It's a capital expenditure of a 1,60,000 crore. It's a import bills are there year on year. And now the shift are there. So there is a waves, we can catch these waves. Medical engineering. The medical engineering is a new area that is opportunities is opening up of this in under this VUCA world. We are witnessing right now. We learn a lot of things in this our journey of a ventilator, and we saw that there are great opportunities available with the many other medical equipments and the engineering field of that. Connectivity is another waves. We see that 5G is coming and more electronic hardware is coming to be this in future. Instead of economy, let's say, we have to just, I have added 1-2 words and split up in a different way. Economy spelling is completely economy, and I have added SH. So C is differentiating, and I say economy. Okay, C is a beauty, and we have to look at that economy in this VUCA word also to be beautifully there. That kind of attitude needs to be developed. And finally, the catchy words are coming is to more and more as a cluster manufacturing. So these are the learnings we have in last decades. We have to be balanced. Any next breath I took this way. Every minute, in a minute we took a 12 to 15 breath. Every breath we have a potential to be a last breath. It might be our last breath, but if we look at the different way, any next breath will be a new life also there. So every minute we are seeing a 12 times a life and 12 times a death. It might be a last moment or it may be a next moment. And this is the word today is moving in a real sense called as a present situations. And if anyone's are able to learn through the impressive this kind of a experience, because all of you have a lot of experience scenarios, and if you are able to make the rapid prototyping and the product should be in a market in a very short span of time, it will be great opportunities for all of us over here. So I wanted to tell you about my experience about the VUCA world. In a last decade, I experienced it. Everybody might be passed through this kind of experiencing, and we have to find out, and we are finding out a growth from this VUCA world over there. And this is our one of the lessons. I think I consume your 8 to 10 minute targets. Thank you. And you can carry on that now.
Yes, thank you so much. Next, we have Prashant Parsana, and would like to request Vaishali Ben to please introduce formally and welcome Prashant Bhai.
Good evening to all eminent speaker and listeners and attendees. I hope I'm audible to all of you.
Yes, yes.
I think Forum, you have to on my video because you might have disabled my video. Yes. We all are lucky to have this symposium about economic changes in last decade. And today we have a very great and experienced and intelligent speakers. And I'm happy and lucky to introduce, to share something about Mr. Prashant Parsana, who is an industrialist from Rajkot. And he has played a very vital role in his company for the growth of the Prashant Casting group of the company. He has played a very nice role for the development of the company because he has a multi-experience. He has achieved many awards from customers such as Siemens, ABB, Regal Group, Extra. I hope everyone can hear me, right?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. Yes. As compared to his leadership as a person, also he is also quite down to earth. Everyone who are working with him and everyone who has experience to work with him has said that he is the person who is always ready to help the people. He is the person who is always ready to guide the youngsters. So he is recognized by and awarded by many Chamber of Commerce, Ministry of Commerce, Government of India, Trade Group, NGOs such as Indian Electrical and Electronics Manufacturers Association and Rotary. So welcome to this panel discussion and over to Mr. Prashant Parsana.
Yeah, thank you very much. So good evening, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank Rajkot Management Association, Chetan Bhai, Parag Bhai, for inviting me for this talk. I remember in 2007, I was asked to speak at a customer's vendor meet in Finland and to talk about India, because India at that time was growing at 8-9% every year. The expectation was that we will keep on growing at this rate and will emerge as the superpower of the future. Our stock market at the time was twice as big as the Chinese stock market. If we fast forward 13 years from there, to the current period, we find that in the last quarter, unfortunately, our growth rate was the worst in the top 20 industrialized nations of the world. Worryingly, our future growth rate might also have reduced from 8, 9, 10%, which we all expect and assume, to almost 5%. And the Chinese stock market now is 5 times India's size. But yet, some economists, some experts say that India has a K-shaped economy. So just as in the letter K, one line goes up. So just like that, some companies are doing exceptionally well. We all know this example of the two Ambani brothers, where one person has now become one of the world's richest men, and the other person is almost bankrupt, right? So when I go deeper into this, which are these companies, what are these common factors among these companies, which have made these companies so successful? And to my mind, three factors play a huge role. The first one is resilience. So companies which have low financial leverage, companies which can have low production capacity utilization and yet can have profitable growth, and companies which have very, very sticky customers. So these are resilient companies. This is one factor which has helped the most successful companies and differentiate them from the, let's say, companies which have failed. Another factor is efficiency. So there is always a trade-off, right, between resilience and efficiency. For example, you can have a company which manufactures everything in-house, but it may happen so that the cost of production is not the cheapest. So it makes sense for companies to buy externally, so reduce their resilience, but increase their efficiency. So there's a trade-off, right? But efficiency is also important. Efficiency comes from scale. In India, especially, you find that in almost all sectors, the big companies have got bigger. You take cement, you take technology, you take telecom, you take retail, you take aviation. You will find that the biggest companies have got bigger. And that is because of scale and the economies of scale, which leads to a more efficient company. The third factor, which has created this very successful companies, is maximizing customer valuation to customers, right? Or maximizing value given to the customer. So I'll give you an extreme example. You take Google. Google is a search engine which all of us use, which is part of our daily lives, and yet it is free. Some economists a few months back did a survey that, how much would people pay for Google if it were a paid service? And the answer was anywhere from $100 a year to almost $17,000 or $18,000 a year. So just wrap your mind around this, that here is a platform in which individual customers are able to get so much value, and yet Google is giving this service for free. And because of this dynamic, billions of consumers are using this platform. And because of this, Google is able to monetize this platform. Like I said, this is an extreme example, but it just goes to show that if you have a business model which maximizes value to the consumer, such a business will always work, provided it is profitable for the company. Another example is Amazon. A few years back, I read an interview of Jeff Bezos, where he was asked, what is this strategy of Amazon? What makes you so successful? And he said that, we have just one aim in life, and that is we bet on this one insight that consumers would always like to buy things cheaper. And every day we spend our hours, our days, our minutes to make it cheaper for the consumers. And because of this, billions of consumers use this platform. And because the consumers are there, the suppliers have no option but to sell on this platform. So it becomes like a virtuous cycle. So how do we relate this kind of examples to businesses like ours? We are very, very removed from a technology company. We do not have billions of users. We also have a constraint to the extent that we cannot, give away our product for free like Google can. But what we believe is that there are a lot of things which any company can do, which are apart from price. By, focusing on these factors, you can ensure that your customers have no option but to buy from you. So what we do every day, we try to ensure that our customer gets the best quality, our customer gets the shortest lead times. We are able to provide the maximum value, the maximum service to our customers. Even attitude matters. For example, feedback time, right? If a customer gives you a query and if you are able to reply back them within, 2-3 days, and if you are able to ensure this consistently throughout the organization, it gives a big, image to the customer that this is a company which means and which does business, which is customer friendly. And the most important key in this is to ensure that the employee is completely aligned, with this entire vision. Just as a consumer, just as a company tries to maximize value to its consumers, a company should also ensure that its employees get value from the company, because only if they get value from the company, that they will be motivated enough to ensure that the company's vision or the company's ability to serve the supplier is met on time, at the right quality, right price, and entire organization is then synchronized to meet the company's objectives. You know, Parakram bhai mentioned that the world is very uncertain, and it is true, right? The world is changing a lot. There are a lot of things on which we have absolutely no control on. But, you know, there are certain things which are under our control. If we just keep on focusing on things which are under our control, it will make it much more easier for us to ensure that we are successful. You know, always remember that success is relative. You know, even in a economy which is not growing, if you focus on things which are within your control, you can always differentiate yourself from your consumers. You know, so these are just some of the few words that I wanted to share. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Dharmesh bhai, please take over. Just a second.
Yes, forum. Dharmesh bhai hasn't joined. We can introduce Ram bhai.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. Okay. So, Ram bhai, we requested Dr. Dharmesh to come and introduce you. But let me introduce Ram bhai. Ram, is an industrialist, is an investment professional, and also an kind of an academician per se, because he is an entrepreneur per se, and manages all these three business so nicely. I think we need to learn, like how to manage, three different diversified business from him. And at the same time, he also serves the Rajkot Management Association equally well. I don't have, more words for Ram, but I can at least say that, he is a very, very trustworthy investment advisor. And if you go for, take an advice, even on the education side, you equally get it. So over to Ram for sharing his experience and towards the last decade. I think the reference has been shifted from 2010 to 2008, right after crisis, Lehman Brothers crisis. So I would request Ram to, take us through 2007 to 2020 and what has been, observed by him, by his investors, and the, industry per large. Over to Ram.
Thank you, Parag bhai, for such kind words. RM is always a family to me, and it's always good to come and speak to a family. After PR comes, so you have anyway maintained the alphabetical order also. And to start with, we left with 2008, and when the Lehman Brothers happened, the world was in a turmoil, stock markets were crashing. There was a spirit, not I would say spirit, there was a sense of mistrust, even among the larger financial institutions, which was never seen before, because every day in the news you would read that this bank has defaulted, this NBFC has defaulted, they've pulled down their shutters, almost more than 100 banks closed down during that financial turmoil. And the government waited for events to happen, and then they acted upon. If you see this time, in this pandemic times, there is a a diagonal shift from the way government has started acting on these kind of situations. Previously, if you see in 2008 to 2010, government used to give quantitative easing measures. That is what they used to call it, QE1, QE2, QE3. And then they would wait that how the economy would bounce back. They would allow institutions perhaps to fail, to default, and then come to the rescue. Typically in US, this was how they had handled the financial crisis. But this time, if you see, all the world economies, all the governments who were in power took a step forward and held the hand of all these financial institutions. And even if you see a classic case in India also, they did not allow even say a Yes Bank to fail, and they brought it back within a span of 1 month. So even if you see today, the way government has come forward and started the quantitative easing measures, suo moto, rather than the industry asking for it, that what will automobile industry ask, what will hospitality industry ask, what will the manufacturing sector ask, the credit was made available. They assured, if you see the initiatives taken, especially in the corporate bond markets, where the government came up and said that we'll be the guarantor of all these bonds, and they did not allow any single major accidents to happen, which is a very contrast thing which has happened in last decade. And if you see that, I think we would be one of the most luckiest generations to witness the development journey. I would not say the COVID times, but at least the development journey which has happened in last decade. And it is not only the personal growth with the GDP growth which happens within every economy, which we have all been witnessing, but if you see the moral standing of an every Indian has also gone up along with this. You name the front and we are there. To start, even on the political front, if I have to start with, that the kind of respect which we have earned in last decade, the kind of red carpet welcome which we are now getting was never heard of. In all the economic forums, we are very well represented, and India is looked upon with a lot of pride, and a nation which can deliver a lot. And if you see, this is really backed by the kind of innovation spirits which have now been a part of Indian journey. Previously, we used to look upon always the Birlas and Ambanis and Tatas to lead a particular industry, and we never had a second generation or a third generation entrepreneurs who were, who used to really make it big. But yes, now you are seeing a paradigm shift in the way people are taking entrepreneur as a career. I remember IIT and IIMs used to always, boast about that we are being hired by these people, we are being hired by the following business houses. But now if you see, there is a new breed of people who are coming out and said, we don't want to be hired. We want to work for our own selves. And we have seen the classic examples of Flipkarts and Swiggies and Zomatos of the world, where India is playing a very leading role. That has been a shift which I think will take India to the next level. Even if you see from the government side, which always used to be a very silent spectator, and lobbying was the day of the order, that if you want to get things done, you need connections, you need people to come and pitch for you, people to represent you. But now if you see, even in the pandemic times, the new industrial policy has been announced, ease of doing business, the ranking has gone up in India. Even for a small industry now, even if they decide to close down an industry, laying off people has become relatively easier. And if you see, due to the new technology platforms which government have started employing, the ease of even a small thing like filing an income tax return or a GST return, which has been made mandatorily online, and faceless assessments or something, which 10 years, had somebody even talked about this, perhaps people would have thought that no, this cannot happen in India. And if you see the surprising changes which have happened in last 10 years, if to give an example, you see the automobile industry, if I would have told somebody in 2010 that look boss, in Rajkot, none of the rickshaws will work on petrol or diesel, they all would have to be CNG, perhaps people would have laughed at me. If I would have said somebody that all the state transport buses would run on CNG and not on diesel fuel, perhaps people would have said, no, you are coming from Mars or something or what? This is where I think India is leading to, what Parakramsinh also mentioned about the new energy drive which has happened is in sync with what steps the government is taking. And if you see the kind of health benefits or the health infrastructure which government is investing now and asking first generation entrepreneurs like Jyoti CNC to please come forward and offer their services. Otherwise, 10 years back, I'm sure, if somebody said, I want to venture into a health industry, people would say, no, this is not meant for us. It was a domain of multinational companies only. I think these are the places where we are leading the pack now. And a lot of credit would also go to millennials now, because the way they have embraced the technology, if you see the way we do business on mobile, the way we trade, in fact, in last 1 year, 40 lakh Demat accounts have been opened. People sitting at home could easily trade. Gone are the days where people used to scream on the Bombay Stock Exchange rings and the transactions were made on the road. I think this is where India is progressing. And yes, we are on the, I would say, on the runway where with a little push, there would be a huge flight of success and rewards, which all of us would get eventually. I was very surprised when government launched the education policy, which was very well drafted and well debated, which is, I think, I read in today's newspaper, is going to be implemented from 2022 onwards, wherein you will see lot of changes happening, the way India is going, the new generation which is going to come up, learning through that particular policy. We will always see the results in next decade or so. But I think we are on a very much on a right path, be it on the political front, be it on the defense front, the kind of posture which we now pose against our friends and enemies both. I think it's a very strong and a firm footing on which we are walking. This is from my side, yes.
Thank you so much, Rambai, for sharing all these wonderful insights and your very striking and inspirational observations for the way our economy has been passing through in particularly last 1 decade. It was really wonderful to know about all these aspects. Our next speaker for the day is Dr. Rasananda Panda. And it's really a pleasure to introduce Dr. Panda, Professor of Economics, Business Management area. And Dr. Panda has done his MA and PhD in Analytical and Applied Economics from Utkal University. And you'd be amazed to know he has been a lecturer at several institutes of repute, including IIM Ahmedabad, MICA, Somlalit Institute of Management Studies, Gujarat University, Pandit Deen Dayal Petroleum University, to name few of them. And Dr. Panda has been covering up, encapsulating several fields of economics, including micro, macro, behavioral economics, informational econometrics, media economics, infrastructure, environmental economics, political economy, and so on and so forth. And astonishingly, he has multiple publications, book chapters, conference proceedings to his credit. And at the same time, besides having a reputed work being done in academics. He has been a consultant to several organizations as well. He has been a chief economist in Gujarat State Petroleum Corporation, and his areas of consultancy do include industry analysis, macroeconomic analysis, social and developmental communication studies, and so on and so forth. His interests are really interesting. I mean, he has the interest, be it industry analysis, be it behavioral economics, be it political economy, econometric modeling, and so on and so forth. And just like today, there has been several other instances wherein he has been an elite speaker to talk about update on Indian economy, be it to the channel partners of Birla Capital Financial Services, ICICI Prudential Mutual Funds, HDFC Mutual Funds, and so on and so forth. So with this, I warmly, on behalf of Rajkot Management Association, we warmly welcome Dr. Panda to kindly share your views on the economy and the paradigm shift over the last 1 decade. Over to you, Dr. Panda.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Archit sir. It is a pleasure for me. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. And good evening to all the ladies and gentlemen. And it is a definitely privilege to be a part of this kind of August gatherings to share my views on economic lessons of the last decade. And I will be failing my duty if I will not thank one of my very nice students known as Jyoti, who has introduced me to this Rajkot Management Association. Jadeja, I am not seeing you, but nevertheless, my gratefulness to you, and of course to the Rajkot Management Association for giving this opportunity. Now, being last speaker and three industrialists spoken about ahead of me, I'll try to be very matter of fact. When I talk about this economic lessons for the last decade, I am trying to restrict myself as far as the data and etc. is concerned from the period 2009-10 to 2019-20. Of course, we are aware that the 2021 3-4 months are gone. So we'll also keep that in mind. And at the same time, to tell you, look, I'm in this profession for last 27 years. So therefore, if I'll add my understanding of economics, I was a student of economics when the economic reforms were were initiated, that is in the year 1991. So I was a master's student, economic students around that time. Then I also, when I look at the 90 to 2000 decade, I consider myself as a student. And so therefore there are a lot of things we used to come to mind. We used to read, study, learn and everything. When I look at 2000, 2010, for me, it was a, starting of my own career as a professional and also to set my family and everything. When I look at 2010-20, it is for me like, look at your own personal growth, professional growth, as well as, you look at the economy also at that point of time. So keeping this in mind, if I'll give a very summary of the economic lessons from the last decade, for me, it is 4 or 5 important lessons that I find. Number one, there is nothing like corruption or ethics. It is a state of mind. Because in economics, we are saying that business is doing business. And number 2, money matters. Money alone doesn't matter. Other things do matter. I'm repeating, money matters. Money alone doesn't matter. Other things do matter. So therefore, this is one of the important learning when I look at the last decade, that rather than talking about corruption, black money, unaccountable money, then X gate, Y gate kind of things, and whether it is ethical or unethical, do your duty that is best and leave on thy Lord the rest. Because at the end of the day, last week, the Madam Finance Minister actually said that pandemic is an act of God. So therefore it is better to leave most of the things on God. Second, learning for me is, भाषण पे रेशन नहीं मिलता है, भाषण देने से रेशन नहीं मिलता है. To get ration, you have to work, you have to perform. Third, you can love government or you can hate government, but you can ignore government. I'm borrowing it from economic understanding. You can love Marx or hate Marx, but you can ignore Marx. Same way, you can love the government or you can hate the government, but you cannot ignore the government. So therefore, government is going to be the be all and end all of the business and economy. Fourth, पहले काम करें फिर अपने मन की बात बोलेंगे, because काम करेंगे उसके बाद मन की बात बोलेंगे, then you know we'll have some kind of पहचान in the industry or in the economy. And always think out of box. My previous speaker has talked about VUCA world and everything, so I will not repeat. Think out of the box. Now again, these are some of the learning to me, that is, business of business is doing business. Money matters. Money alone doesn't matter. Other things do matter. Number one. Number two, भाषण से राशन नहीं मिलता. Number three, you can love government or you can hate government, but you cannot ignore the government. Number four, पहले काम करिए, उसके बाद मन की बात बोलिए. Now I'll substantiate. Correct? I have another 5-6 minutes to substantiate. All of us are aware, the decade, let's say 10-11 or 9-10 started with all global financial crisis. Then you have a nuclear deal and all these things happened. So Singh is king happened. You got a new government in 2009. And you know that government came into existence, and initial 1 or 2 years, they're absolutely going for the, benefiting the industry, benefiting the banks and everything. That talk about a lot of, policy, which are by and large beneficial to the people at large. At the same time, they also introduce something like, retrospective taxation and things like that. In the process, what happened, next 2-3 years, we have a lot of, we talk about scams, 2G scam, Colgate, then you have Commonwealth game, lot of things, scams and everything came. We talk about policy paralysis. Yes, it has happened, policy paralysis. Therefore, we talked about something known as a new government that came in 2014, and we felt happy about it. But remember, all these scams and everything were happening, but your economy was growing. If you look at the data set and everything up around that period, 9, 10, 10, 11, 11, 12, 12, 13, 13, 14, economy was growing, and it was going at 6.7, 7.5, 8, 8.5%, and things were happening. And another thing that was also around that year was that period criticized was MNREGA, which was started in 2005, but get prominence during the 2009 to 2020 kind of thing. MNREGA, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act or Bill. Now, MNREGA, it was known as storehouse of corruption, but I'm sure all of us are reading the newspaper, magazines and things today, perhaps that MNREGA is saving the Indian population, especially rural poor, during this COVID time. And the present government has already put up 40,000 lakh crores extra. So that sum that is being planned for this 2020-21 is close to 1 lakh crores. Figures are not important. What is important here is a scheme known as MNREGA, which was the storehouse of corruption. It was told as a storehouse of corruption, and therefore the government of the day was never in favor of that. But at the same time, you see that becomes one of the flagship program during the period of crisis. So therefore, which government is there doesn't matter. It is a government that matters, because we talk about a program MNREGA, which is highly successful in creating jobs, giving livelihood and other things. So therefore, I gave 2-3 examples. So therefore, you have to take that call whether MNREGA is required or not, full of corruption, everything, if you feel. So all the 2G scams, everything happened, but we got a great success known as 3G. We also great success story Indian telecom industry. The industry is in a mess, but consumers are having the best time. Industry is in a mess. Telecom industry is in a mess, but we as a consumers are getting the best out of it. Let's not mention the name of the company. We are aware. Now, next, we had a known as Make in India, correct? And one of the signature program that happened, Make in India. So we are also aware that I myself had lectured a lot of things on Make in India. But now, if there was a Make in India, let's say 5 years back, when he did, why require Atmanirbhar Bharat? So sometimes you have to think that these programs are nice, but implementation somewhere lacked, or maybe the manufacturing sector did not get that much of incentives. Therefore, at the stroke of a crisis, at the stroke of some kind of disturbances, that sector is showing the highest level of contraction. If I'm sure it is our purchase margin index or the growth in manufacturing sector, they are not that encouraging during last 3 to 4 years. So therefore, here is a Make in India policy kind of thing announced, but it may not have worked. All of us are aware the notion of demonetization, how it worked, whether it worked or not, whether it was able to unearth black money or not. So let's not go there, but yes, we had a demonetization. Same thing, we had a GST, correct? Now, when you had GST, we also know that what is happening nowadays regarding GST. Hardly 4 or 5 times the target of revenue of 1 lakh crore might have been achieved. And states are fighting with each other that whether center should pay for the compensation or states should pay for that. And at no point of time, we got the desired revenue from GST. But yes, GST is a great tax. We somewhere tried to, make it a little bit here and there. We implemented it faultily. Therefore, GST, a great idea, great policy, but because of maybe faulty implementation kind of things, is not that much success. But yes, we have to agree that it is a policy. It has its merit. Same thing, we are aware of the banking and financial sector mesh, and we have a IBC. We had an IBC 4 or 5 years back. We also had a NCLT, NCLT kind of things. They are fighting among each other, and things, the sector is in a mesh. Non-performing assets have increased. And, the companies are facing the chance of getting bankrupt, correct? And very soon, the banks are going to, issue the personal guarantee. They will get to encash the personal guarantee. So these are not the problems which have come up only during the last 6 or 8 months. These problems are coming up in the last decade, maybe for last 4, 5, 6, 7 years. So your financial sector is in a mess. And when all these things are happening, one may think about everything is bad, everything is not happening nicely. It is a VUCA world, so things are agile. But at the same time, without naming the company, there are certain companies, at least 2, 3 companies that I know, and I will give the reference to that. One company was digging the entire country, correct? Digging the entire country, trying to put up high amount of capital expenditure in these programs. When this crisis of allegation and counter allegation of corruption, all these things are going on, at that company is now the sector leader. That company is now the sector leader, correct? And not only a sector leader in one sector, but it is going to a sector leader in 2 other sectors. And the global giants in the form of Amazon, Microsoft, then the Facebook, and all these are now at Google. They are all dying to be a part of that company in the sector that the company is interested, that the company is there. So therefore, when all these things are happening, there are certain companies, they're doing well. That also includes some of these micro, small and medium enterprises, like my previous speaker talked about. Some of the small and medium enterprises also doing good. At the same time, same thing, the Indian civil aviation industry is in a mess. All of us are aware, Indian civil aviation industry is in a mess. But at the same time, you think there are certain companies you are talking about having close to 26% or 30%, 1/3 of the total air passenger market. So, it is for us as a, economist, for us as managers, for us as industrialists, has to think about whether we'll go on and creep about all these things that is happening around us, be it, good government, bad government, or, corruption, ethics, or let's say the crisis and everything, or we should do our own work that we are good at and say to the rest of the world that yes, things are happening, and so long as citizens are better off, so long as we as a citizen of the country are better off, either as a direct consumer or as a financial stakeholder or as a employee, so therefore we should be happy about it. And as I said, act of God, yes. And my previous speaker also mentioned that still we are dependent on monsoon. Still we are also thinking about any kind of such kind of pandemic happens and kind of thing, rather than thinking about how to we should build our infrastructure, everything as regards to public health, etc. is concerned. Still we are thinking about an act of God. And today only what WHO has said, yes, it is nice to say that it is a natural calamity, but at the same time, please remember that such kind of crises are likely to come in the future also. Therefore, it is better to create our own infrastructure and be prepared for that. So if I will conclude my monologue, and I'm sure my 10 minutes are about over, I will say last decade has made us to understand that government may come and go, leaders may come and go. Let's have our own gut of doing business. Let's have our own gut of thinking about our own welfare. And if you will think that, work towards that, therefore, you know, I mean, India's this decade is also going to be good for us, correct? And we may not be worried about this instances that is happening in next 1 or 2 quarters or 1 or 2 years, because it will pass like a bad time. So therefore, I'll rest my case by telling, let's do our own duty rather than being worried about any other things, because I'll end by a quote from Adam Smith, who is known as father of modern economics. It is enlightened self-interest. Let's all of us bother about our own enlightened self-interest. When you are worried about an enlightened self-interest, let's also keep in mind, let's not harm others. Be selfish, but don't harm others. Let's be carried away by enlightened self-interest, and at the same time, be careful about others' interest also. Therefore, we as a nation, we as a society, we as an economy will do well. So therefore, these are some of my thoughts from the last decade, or economic lessons from the last decade. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was wonderful. Like we all must have felt that must have all felt that jealous about your students who are studying in your class. It was wonderful oration and point wise and the quotes that will ring in our head after a long time when this session is over. So now we are exactly on time. It's 7, and now we have 1 hour of wonderful Q&A and panel discussion. I'll request our president, Mr. Parag Jobanputra, to continue this panel discussion and for about 55 minutes, and then we'll formally conclude with a summary and vote of thanks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Forum. Thank you so much. And rightly mentioned, having Dr. Panda, summarizing it. And I think, Dr. Panda told us that what is the exact meaning of Atmanirbhar as far as the industries and businesses are concerned, and what exactly we have to, act to run our businesses. I think the last decade, if you see, the reference we already taken 2007-8 and post 2007-8. I think to understand this scenario itself requires kind of competence and common sense. Otherwise, to understand this volatility, the VUCA world, which Parakram Bhai explained, the resilience which is required to fight this VUCA world, which was a message given by Prashant Bhai. And then Ram told us that how the various markets are detaching from all these things. And Professor Dr. Rasananda Panda told us what exactly the message is. But let me start with the numbers. So the if you see the GDP numbers of the world and various large economy, after 2007-8, US grew from nearly 15 trillion to almost double the size of the economy. China post 2007-8, irrespective of the stock market performance, grew from nearly $4 trillion economy to only $13 trillion. And in India also did similarly a little better in terms of now around 2.77 trillion from a base of 1.1 or 1.2 trillion dollar economy. So roughly 2.5 times or less than that. But if you see the rest of the economies of Europe and many other large countries, including France, Germany, these economies are still as it is. Their GDP is just below or near to their 2008 high. So these economies are completely detaching themselves from the rest of the world. So my question to Dr. Panda here is, and let us start the discussion about what these countries are structurally doing. USA, China, to an extent Germany, and India, and what is the because this rest of these countries are not growing, and when you do the business with them, there are risks coming from these factors. So the question is, or the point over here is what these countries are structurally doing different so that they are still growing at a much better pace than rest of the like economies.
Okay, Parag, thank you for asking this question. I'll make a modest attempt to answer this one. You know, growth in US, China, and India, if you look at that, they are the natural growth because all of us are having a domestic demand. Definitely for India and China, we have a huge domestic demand. So even if something somewhere wrong happens, our domestic market is competent and capable enough to make our economy to grow. So I myself is not happy the rate at which we are growing, and we are comparing with US and China. So therefore, for US, China, and India, the growth is a natural growth. Correct. Now, coming back to your question, the European country that you named, I will say if you go a little back, let's say if you look at from 1970s onwards, when these economies are growing at a faster rate as compared to China or India or many of the country, perhaps we are now in that stage. In economics, we say, like one of my previous speaker also spoke, these countries of Europe, we call them as OECD, Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development countries, or they're most developed countries. So they have achieved a set growth pattern. Plus, these countries are not having enough of domestic demand, and these countries are not having the productive population because the countries are aging population, and you are talking most of the European, Scandinavian countries and all these things. So therefore, they're largely now dependent on the senior citizens population. So therefore, the productivity is not happening. So therefore, in economics, we have a GDP sage, concept of GDP sage, gross domestic product. It is nothing but if the productivity of the country increases, then only gross domestic product can increase. Perhaps all these countries that you mentioned in Europe, they are now are not that productive like the country like we and China. Correct? So that is one of the important reasons for these countries to not grow like us, number one. Therefore, second thing, we call them in economics that they are all some of the saturated or matured economy. Correct? If they're saturated or matured economy, that means they have hit a ceiling. The moment they hit a ceiling, then how much they can grow. So therefore, perhaps these are some of the points that I can say. Number one, they are less productive population because of the senior citizenship, or let's say demographic. They are in a certain stage of demographic dividend. They are not getting the demographic dividend. So these are some of the reasons for that. Plus, I'm sure you are aware, the crisis of last 6-7 years in the form of Brexit, in the form of European Union integration. Therefore, all these things have also made them little bit more, dependent on themselves rather than depending upon the other countries of the world. And we saw it when this, pandemic affected in some of the European countries. They cannot think of anything to do because they are not prepared for all these things. Their infrastructure is developed, true. Their health infrastructure is good, true. But they never face this kind of number, this kind of stress. So therefore, they are bound to break down in such kind of situations. So that I'm not surprised the fall in these countries' growth over last 8 to 10 years period.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor. Parakrampa, if I take this, point to you and say, okay, of course, the demographic dividend, or the own consumption, which Dr. Panda mentioned, and he also told the reasons about Europe. But then the political will and the ambition of the country, USA, China. How, to what extent, this drives the growth of this country?
See, if you look at that, I can tell you that, let's say France, okay, because I'm observing that country very deeply because we have invested there big way. See, there also the leadership is like us, let's say very new innovative way. They are also coming into a political will also there. Okay, there are people, let's say today the president of France. Have you thought anytime the person can enter in only a 6 month of his political career and he become a president? So this kind of innovation also these kind of people are able to bring, and that's the change you can see in the coming days in Europe there. People are accepting this kind of a political will, political people, is completely out of the box. The Macron was nowhere in his party. The president, the party has formed 6 months back. So don't feel that they are going to be completely die. Okay. In the other side, if you look at that, the political scenario in Germany, okay, the lady Merkel, they say is a grandma. Okay, the grandma is ruling since last 15 years. Okay, and she is also still to doing the most prepared woman in this pandemic situation. The way Germany and their leadership has act against all other countries is wonderful over there. The lowest death ratios in these situations in that country today. She was the most prepared. She has announced in January, middle of January, and she says that we are going to affect 70% of our people are going to be affected with this coronavirus. That much of a courage she was having it. So they are behind right now in terms of growth momentums and all, but there are too many things they are going inside there. These countries are going to come back, okay? And the scenario is changing there also. Political will is there, the big way to grow. People don't want to grow because that now they reach to a pinnacle there. And the doctor said that they were at 70s to growing like us. What we are telling that what we are looking in future, all life they are enjoying today. They are in that situations. After 20 years, we also like to have a 5 days and 35 hours a week, and then kind of a social securities and all. These are all our dream. What we are dreaming, those guys are having that today. But the things are changing there also. And this Macron is a classic story, Parag bhai, I'm seeing there. Yeah.
And Parakram bhai, like, what do you say as far as political will of China and USA? Because they are, like, still very rapidly growing. How do you read, like, between these two leaders and their political will?
I'm not, my core is not in political parameters to measure that, but yes, China is a very I say there is a great disciplined country, and the way that gentleman has controlled a pandemic of this corona. Okay, we all are facing. And that bloody guy has been controlled within 2 months' time, and they have stopped at 83,000 or 85,000 people. And that's their will. Okay, that's their power. They can rule out anywhere. Okay. US, I think to understand that Trump, I don't know his leadership is anybody in the world is able to understand him. I definitely not understood about what is the leadership over there, and I don't know much about the US and their political situations there. Your
Mic is unmute. Please unmute mic.
Yes. So thank you, Parakram bhai. Ram, taking this forward, like, to what extent growth of economic growth of USA is because of like the financial discipline, the like federal intervention, and like the innovation. So how do you describe this, like as far as the like growth of USA is concerned? Like when we look at Nasdaq, like we all know, like going through the roof. So like any such observations on the economic development and like intervention and policy framing of Fed and innovation? Two questions.
So, see, any economy which has a near to zero interest rate, okay, propelling growth with money is always easier because you are always there to lend. and you want people to borrow also. So it is a very credit fueled economy, which is of US, if you say. People spend also a lot, and they have been always been living like that. So typically they pay salaries every Friday. Saturday, Sunday, people go and spend it. Monday, they are back to work. Okay, so in a sub-zero or near to zero economies, industrial growth it is more out of innovation. Okay, so US, if you see the latest innovative is Tesla. The way he has innovated the entire vehicle, the electronic vehicle, the way he's marketing it, the number of units which are being sold. I think that is what is fueling the US economy. Um, they always thought that outsourcing is the best way to go ahead, and they focus on, say, let's get the best brains of the world to work for us and let them innovate. We will get it manufactured outside. So if you see Apple, whether you see other the way they have outsourced IT from India, manufacturing from China, so they are there to innovate and then produce it in such a way that the entire world becomes their consumer. I think that is what US is all about. An $18 trillion economy is an elephant by itself when it runs. It walks step by step, but yes, each step is always on the forward thing. In spite of what it's very difficult to interpret Trump or his economies or the way he functions. But if you see, he has been able to deliver uh, what US wanted. That they call it a rustic economy. They call it over there. The typical Americans, they are fond of him. They love him. That is why they brought him to power. And so I think US itself at times gives a lot of example to at least emerging economies like us, that this is what we aspire for. This is what we want to become, the innovation hub. And I think India is deriving those ideas from US itself. And if you see all the major corporations in US, luckily or incidentally, they're all now being headed by Indians who have Indian origins rather. Okay, so they have been able to drain the best brains, from the world and assemble them in such a way that they work for the US dreams. I think this is the more difference. And if you see Fed and all, they're always there to give money. If you see, they have not allowed, after the 2008 crisis, they have learned it in a very hard way. And eventually we have to come and help them. May as well help them now itself. I think this is the major difference.
Yeah, thank you, Rambai. I think very, very interesting point you made. Going to Prashant Bhai. Prashant Bhai, you work with, all those multinational companies from Europe and, even the US side of it. So, if you look at the last decade, there are a lot of volatility, policy changes in these countries. And, these are very large organizations you work with. What is your experience of these companies behave a little differently in this economic turmoil? Any lesson from which you'd like to share with audience over here from these companies, working with these companies?
So see, what is becoming very apparent is that India now is considered as a bucket by itself, right? So when a company such as Siemens or Toshiba or ABB or General Motors or any of these very, very large companies, when they look at their scope of operations, right, they look at India as a supply hub by itself. Now, whether that percentage is 1%, 2%, 10% or 20%, it all depends on the internal dynamics of the companies, the competitive landscape, etc., etc. But India now for sure is a hub, or is considered as a bucket by itself, right? And Another very interesting thing to note here is that these companies are coming to India, just not as a supply hub, but they also want to develop a supply hub here because they look at it as a potential market in the future. So if they have already a well-developed supply chain in India, it becomes all that more easier for them to enter this market in the future. The key challenge, I think, is not just becoming a supplier to these multinationals. The problem, I think, which India has and will have in the coming years as well, is that you take the example of Apple, right? So Apple has, I think, hardly 50 or 60,000 employees for a company which is almost $2 trillion, right? Almost 80% of India's GDP. It has hardly 50, 60,000 people. 99% of its value, 99% of its volume comes from China. But just sheerly by the, Rambhai mentioned that they are able to innovate. This innovation premium that Apple commands is almost 80% in value terms of the overall chain, right? So in volume terms, it is minimal. What happens in the US is of no consequence. But in value terms, most of the value is being grabbed by, Apple. So similarly, in all case of large companies, most of the value is being grabbed by these companies, and only the low value or the volume stuff is being done in countries like India, China. And this is where the challenge for India comes in, that how do we migrate, from becoming just suppliers to becoming brands by ourselves, right? So, for example, when in India, if you buy a machinery or if you buy a product, if it's coming from China, we automatically assume that it has to be cheaper than something coming from the US or from Europe, right? Without even going into the specifics of the product, without knowing whether the product is actually superior or inferior or no. You just, by the sheer name of the, of the company, you just decide how much valuation premium to give. Now, this intrinsic value, which is in all our heads, is because of this branding premium or this innovation premium that, companies from the West get. And how does India kind of break into this very, very rarefied club? This is going to be the big challenge of the future. People cite China as a very successful example, and China is successful, there's no doubt about that. But imagine in the last few months, what destruction of value, the Chinese brand name has gone into. That now, if you are a TikTok, just because you are owned by a Chinese owned company, you don't want that in your country. And I think I read in the papers today that TikTok is in, ByteDance is in talk of selling, of moving itself from China to Singapore. So, at a level, this kind of things start mattering a lot more. So just, being suppliers, being a supplier is obviously good, right? And becoming a responsible supplier, or being, India being considered as a serious part of a company's supply chain is important. But I think we have to migrate from just becoming suppliers to having our own brand name companies. One more thing I'd just like to mention here, you were, Rambhai was mentioning about the US. One thing which has really mattered a lot in the US in the last 10 years is the discovery of shale gas, right? So imagine that till 2007, 2008, USA was a net importer of oil. Just by its, the innovation inherent in the US economy, it was able to become not only a surplus country, but it became a net exporter. And this single kind of innovation, led to almost 70 or 80% of growth that US has gone through in the last 10, 20 years. In the last 10 years. And this is in terms of, its net competitiveness. You also take the example of some of these few large companies like, Apple, Facebook, Google. So these 5 or 6 companies by itself have almost led all the, increase in market value in global economy, almost by 50 or 60%, in sum. So just a few of these companies, and the fact that USA is able to throw off this or, create these companies at, every few years is incredible. Think of Amazon. The US, capitalist system allowed a company like Amazon to not make money for 20 years. And yet people kept on funding it, right? Take Tesla. For the last 20 years, it has not made a single profit. It just, I think, turned profitable in the last quarter. But the beauty of the American capitalist system is that it allows companies like this to make this very, very, visionary, long-term investments, which kind of helps these companies to, go to the next level. So yeah, this is what I wanted to share.
Yeah, thank you, Prashant. Coming back to, like the Indian scenario or the local scenario, the last decade, also saw lot of disruption also. But going back to disruptions, let me just ask you, one thing to Dr. Panda is about the stimulus. See, in 2008, again, we fueled the economy by pumping in, money, quantitative easing in our own terms. And then, we ended up with, high inflation, current account deficit, fiscal deficit, and then, all the mess which we see now. Again, post-COVID, of course, it is such a pandemic, that government will intervene. But how do you read, this fiscal stimulus, and then, particularly the stimulus or the, the plans announced by government, and what do you see in future? What's the impact you see on the Indian economy?
Good question, sir. Sir, my view is stimulus, given the situation that we were in 2008-9, or we are in this current situation, is definitely required. Correct. So because, as I said in my opening remark, that you can love government or you can hate government, but you cannot ignore the government. So therefore, this stimulus in these times are definitely required for the country at large. And of course, in economic theory and other things, I will not go into that, but I will say whenever you give a stimulus, naturally government expenditure goes up, and the revenue will not go up to that extent. Your deficit will go up. There will be pressure on interest rate. Reserve Bank of India cannot go on artificially reducing the interest rate for a longer time. And even if the government says, if the RBI governors are having some kind of self-esteem, they will leave. And we have seen that 3 governors are left. Correct. So definitely the stimulus are desirable if the situations are like 2008-9 or situation like this. So there is, yes, it has the negative economic consequences. But for the betterment of the society, for betterment of the economy, or for people at large, such stimulus are desirable. However, stimulus in the form of recapitalization of the banks, not desirable. Stimulus in the form of, giving some kind of tax incentives, not desirable. So therefore, to me, give the stimulus where it is required. There is no point in, giving a stimulus to the corporates when you know very well that these corporates or these banks, they are in that situation because of their own balance sheet problem. So if stimulus is given to solve the balance sheet problem of the company, or balance sheet problem of the PSU, or balance sheet problem of the private corporates, these are not desirable. Rather, these are, we call it as crony capitalism. Otherwise, as an economist, stimulus is desirable whenever the economy needs it and economy is in crisis. Yes, it has its own negative impact. Therefore, we say deficit or fiscal deficit doesn't matter. It also matters. It also doesn't matter. It matters when the stimulus or expenditure are high, because they are not going to put any investment, or in terms of government investment, and they are good if it is promotes consumption by the people, it promotes the demand by the people, or it is there for a certain period, as a result of which the pent-up desire or the latent demand of the population can come up, so that economy can come back to its relatively earlier positions. So these are desirable. So that's my take on stimulus.
Yeah, thank you. Parakramsinh, we all this disruption in the business we saw, banking cleanup, or the GST introduction. So if we take this couple of, so how this two disruptions India absorbed, and any experience or any lessons you would like to share?
The particular disruption, what I said in a VUCA word also there, the disruptions are coming in every area. That, let's say today that we have seen, this is just a 2 policy change. Any government policy is also changing very frequently now. GST, yes, we have to be prepared, and from our organizations that in my table I don't know what is a GST. The day first it is swift, it is changed from the excise to GST, and we all have changed towards to that. So all people have to be prepared for any tech structures or anything, okay? And we have to adjust this kind of a thing. So GST, I don't think so. It is a disruption. Okay. I don't consider GST as a disruption. Disruptions are coming. There are let's say many other areas in terms of a let's say today, not today, but exactly 2 years back, all automobile people, one day they realize suddenly the minister has said that we need by 2030 to be all our vehicles should be electrical vehicles. It's just a one statement. And see that all automobile industries in India is completely as finished. We are not coming out since last 2 years. At that time, we are able to, let's say, producing in 2018, 17, 18 to be a 3 to 3.5 million vehicles. Only a one statement without any preparations. There is no roadmap. We don't know what is the power requirement. We don't know what is our preparedness to implement. Okay, and the entire industries as completely on a risk. This is called as a completely a disruption. On those times, I have come across with the many people of my customers, and they all those who are dedicated and on automobile industries, they have shifted their business, the focus from Indian industries to the exports, and they all people are trying to balance against this disruptions. Again, let's say we don't know when the electrical vehicle will come. Tomorrow, you need your actual need for the vehicle is going to be there. So you have to be present also, and you have to think that what is if this government said tomorrow this vehicle will not to be on a road. Even the court, if you look at that, court has declared that this vehicle will not to be on a road from 1st of April. Okay. So these all kind of things. So my experience is that in this situation, everybody has to focus not much time to invest onto a long-term planning. If we invest more and more on a long-term planning, it will not work over here. We have to be flexible that. Because disruption is coming from any angles, any type, any ways.
Yes, Parakramsinh. I think you like openly shared, that was, like one of the, this thing that post-COVID, that was a question for both Prashant Bhai and for you also. Let me just go to Prashant Bhai. Like two things. Yeah, please.
Parag, I would like to, the Ramba and we all are talking about the US that I would like to share one view of mine about that US is losing their capabilities of innovations, because they are killing today is to be a competitiveness. There is no small organizations. Each organization is become bigger and bigger and bigger. Once the organization is bigger, they are coming, big birds are coming and eating to one birds. So they are killing their all competitiveness because there is no small organization now. And they are killing their own competitiveness. In future, US will going to be in big trouble because you have only a few large companies. If you take that now, the number of companies is few now, because Facebook is become owner of a WhatsApp, and tomorrow God knows who will be a owner of these two, and then bigger and bigger like that. So US is in my view that is losing their competitiveness.
That's a very out of box observation, and great to have your view. Thank you so much, Parakram Bhai, for this particular view. And going to Prashant Bhai, any impact of trade wars you see, positive or negative, on the manufacturing side of it?
So, in certain businesses, there has been a benefit for Indian companies, depending on what the tariffs, have been applied by the US government on, on which tariff items of China. So I'm assuming you're talking about the US-China trade war.
Yes,
Right?
yes,
Yeah.
and
So,
benefits to like you and like other
yeah,
manufacturers.
so there have been certain benefits for sure, and also there is this big realization in the US that the Chinese state or the Chinese government is not a reliable partner for the future. So wherever it is possible for them to diversify their supply base, they will do so. So even apart from the trade war, I think all American companies, whoever is buying from China, they are actively looking out for sources elsewhere, right? The problem for India is that India is not the only alternative to China. There is Vietnam, there is Thailand, there is Bangladesh, for example, in textiles. So, India will have to work hard to ensure that we are the beneficiaries of this trade shift. But it is without doubt that the trade shift is happening. It will take time, but the next 10, 15, 20 years will look very, very different from the past 10, 20 years.
Okay, yes. And Rambai, like taking, that point of US competitiveness, if we look at, like 100 as a base in 2008, NASDAQ, like is now at, say, for example, 341, India is 211, and FTSE at nearly 124. Given a choice, and, like what we discussed, you and your investor would still like to invest in NASDAQ and, like propel that economy further?
So, honestly speaking, I'll be rather diplomatic over here than to give a clear-cut opinion. See, investments, we have all learned, you should always not put eggs in one basket and you should spread the risk. And we have all been learning this. Interestingly, if you see now, even in India, today you have a basket of funds available wherein you can decide in which country you want to invest. So whether it is US opportunities, whether it is European markets, whether it is Latin and American markets, you have China specific funds, you have Asian specific funds, you have NASDAQ also with some, you have gold mining companies which incidentally give more return than the gold itself. You'll be surprised that the gold mining companies have given a return of 56% absolute in last 1 year compared to the gold return of 46%. So a lot of, and there are no gold mining companies in India, by the way. These are the listed companies which are in Canada and South Africa and Australia and all those places. So you have a lot of now ideas available for any investor to explore. And in fact, now the new thing which is coming is not only US, because previously the debt was always provided by US for any investments, because having a 40 billion dollar fund is very common in US. And to be a part of that kind of fund, everybody would like to be. So now the new trend which is emerging is global opportunity funds which are coming, which says that why be country specific, let us be sector agnostic, let us be country agnostic, and go and see and invest into those countries which give superior opportunities to make returns. So I think that is the new trend which is catching up, and we advise our investors to diversify, and it is paying us well also now. The way NASDAQ has given returns, or where S&P 500 has given returns. So generally 10 to 15% of your portfolio should be out of your own country, which will diversify and give returns also.
Yeah, thank you. And what do you read as far as the gold prices and, like it's a risk averse trade, or it's basically, like kind of a beginning of a commodity boom starting with gold as we saw, like in previous decades?
So very interestingly, if I tell you, the stock market returns and the gold returns for last 10 years are almost same. Okay. But So in last 5 years, obviously gold has given a better return than if I'm when I'm saying gold returns with market returns are a typical index returns I'm talking about. Number one. Number two, you should also keep in mind that in India, the import duty on gold is 12%. That is why you have a lot of incidents wherein we see on television, people trying to smuggle in gold because you 2.5 hour flight you take from Dubai and you have 12% absolute return waiting for you. So that is what is propelling a lot of smuggling also. But gold has essentially always been a store of capital. So when everything in the world goes tipsy-turvy, people generally there is a flight for safe assets where gold is categorized. In India, yes, the trend is catching on because people love to see returns and invest. And that is why if you see the amount of money which is being poured and pumped into gold ETFs is an all-time high. And yes, with a pinch of salt, if government goes back to the uh, older regime wherein the gold import duty was 2%, then you will see a 10% absolute decline in gold prices, maybe on a single day also. So yes, one can consider gold, but that cannot be the only place to invest. I think there are other alternatives also which one needs to keep in mind.
Yes, Ram, but it is not like because of the like safety people are moving. It is because of the greed also. That's what I think you are like indicating at
People
this point of time.
people love to see returns and invest in India, especially. So generally, when we drive a car, we see the front mirror, not the rear view mirror. But in India, we invest by seeing in the rear view mirror. Because gold has given highest returns, we invest now.
Thank you, Ram. I think we are running out of time, so I'll just come to each individual. If I have missed a like a point, and you still would like to share, so I will start with Parakram Bhai. Anything you would like to share further? If by any chance, if I have missed or any point you would like to share now, you're on mute, Parakram Bhai.
So I would like to say a final word like this in this VUCA word. Illiterate of the word are not those who can't read or write, but those who do not learn, unlearn, and relearn. That is the
Message. Yeah. Thank you so much, Parakram Bhai. Prashant Bhai, any final word, any wise word for like all the remaining audience?
So, I during my short speech, I mentioned that India's growth rate has gone down, and it's a very worrying development. But also, what we should not lose, focus of the fact that we are a young country, and we are one of those few countries in the world which does not derive its growth from commodities, right? So India has a lot of industry. We are into services, we are into industry, we are into partly also into commodities, and our main, let's say, USP is our people. So let's be confident that we, the people of India, will ensure that we carry this burden with us and ensure that India goes into this golden future which all of us hope and expect and assume is for us, but we have to work hard for it. So it's not an easy road, but it's a road worth taking.
Yes. And Rambai, any like lessons you particularly like learned and say, okay, no, this is something like a great lesson learned over a period of like last decade.
So I think the biggest lesson which I have learned is not taking risk is the biggest risk. And if you believe that India will grow from a $2 trillion economy to a $5 trillion economy with a conviction, if you are moving ahead with that, and if you believe in that, then a lot of money will be made for all the people who will be in the right asset classes. I think this is what I would conclude with.
Yeah. Thank you. And Dr. Panda?
Please, you're on
You're
mute.
on mute, Panda ji. Yeah.
So my take will be like this. Never jump to a conclusion immediately about any policy, because sometimes the policy are, some kind of, narratives, or some kind of policy are mere announcement to please the people. There is saying we can fool all the people for some time. We can fool some people for all the time, but we cannot fool all the people for all the time. So never jump to a conclusion simply by telling this policy is good or bad, great. Wait for some time, understand the policy, find out how it is going to benefit you if you are a business person, how it is going to benefit you if you are an entrepreneur, how it is going to benefit you, you are a startup, or you are going an academician, or you are a student or anything. So therefore, try to get an understanding of the policy. Third, always depend on some kind of, diversity of opinion, because in a democratic country like us, it is the diversity of opinion that matters. Therefore, today's business standard talks nicely. It is better to listen to the people who matters rather than, telling that, yes, we are doing great or the government is doing great and all these things. Third, fourth, never try to be a panwala. Chuna, katha, supari. There is life beyond business or life beyond being a panwala. So broaden your canvas. Don't be a panwala, only being worried about chuna, katha and supari. These are my takes, sir.
That's very, very interesting. And I think everybody will remember this, I think, the product basket beyond Chuna, Katha and Pan is absolutely, absolutely necessary. Let me just start with, few of the questions. And the question from Rajubai Haryani to Parakram Bhai is, sir, have you, framed your post-pandemic vision, or there is a need for a post-pandemic vision?
What is the question?
Is the have you framed your post-pandemic vision,
Pandemic.
or is there a need pandemic? Yeah, post-COVID.
First of all, COVID is not finished yet. So I am living in this exactly on a center of the pandemic situation today. I'm living right now with the different hospital, and also definitely I have not thought about that what is going to be tomorrow. I'm trying to save myself and my team and all my countrymen today. Minimum damages should be there. I think, and I request all of you that please take care. This the situation of Corona is just a beginning of India over here. We can think and talk all post-pandemic situation. I really look at that. Once it will be over, we will look at that. What is the vision of tomorrow?
Yes, thank you, Parakram Bhai. Thank you for your, concern and wishes. Over to Prashant. Prashant Bhai, there is one question for you on, based on the, talk we had on innovation. Have we, are we taking, innovation seriously in our organization, and what are the initiatives we are taking?
So, in my business, there are a few constraints in the sense that we make components for other companies, right? So there's not a lot of innovation that we can do on the product side. But what we try to do at least is on the process side. So we've tried to use as much as automation as we can. For example, in the last 10 years, our productivity has gone up by maybe 60 or 70%. And yet the number of employees that we have taken on has been more or less fairly stable. So in the future, it's also going to be the same thing. I think automation prices, Parakram Bhai will also confirm this, that automation prices are going down all the time. I think there could be a time in the very near future that having robots might make it interesting as well, because the prices 5 years from now could become very, very interesting. So I think for process for process oriented companies like ours, I think automation is a big blessing, because we have very few avenues to reduce costs, right? Because we are, let's say, doing business with very, very large companies, so we are in a very cost conscious environment. And for us, focusing on automation, reducing manpower, as a percentage of the total production cost, plays a huge role in ensuring that we continue to thrive in the future as well.
Yeah, thank you, Prashant. Rambhai, there is one question for you, and I'm just reading it out completely for you. You are third generation entrepreneur and you have transformed the whole business digitally and technology driven now. What is your advice to those who are hesitant or who have not transformed the business digitally or technologically?
So I think the answer is very simple. If you do not transform or if you do not adapt to the change, you will perish. Technology is something which now cannot be ignored at any cost. Every organization has to, previously doing computerization was a big thing. Okay, but now not doing computerization is a rare thing, which now if you see today, you go to any shop or any factory or something, you ask somebody and say, no, we still have a manual accounting system. You'll never get even accountants for that anymore. So I think the new generation which is coming is full of technology, and the way you imbibe and embrace these technology developments. In fact, in some of the companies, the new department has been launched that how much still we can innovate and digitalize all the operations. So I think there is no choice if you do not embrace technology anymore.
Dr. Panda, your favorite student has asked a question for you. How people can know that they have macro view or not? How to validate whether someone is panwala or not? Should I repeat the question or have you got it?
No, I got it. I got it, sir. I got it. So, Jadeja, thank you for asking the question and to be present in the this webinar also. As I keep on saying to all my students and the professionals also, always keep a tab of information that is available with you. I will not say newspaper. Once upon a time I used to tell to people ki chapa padhte rahiye. So now I will say keep a tag of the informations, and try to find out which are information required for you, not required for you. So if you keep a tab of the information about the macroeconomic situations, macro view, and you keep on reading your favorite person who writes, whether I'm not saying English, it could be any language. So if you can read it, then you got a diversified view. And you also sometimes have to believe some of the information that is available, whether it is from government or Reserve Bank of India or World Bank or any other, credible agency. So by doing that, you can have a macro view. Once you have a macro view, then you can form certain opinions, correct? And remember, always say that these are my opinions. And because your opinion cannot be forced on everybody, correct? Data are there. Data could be neutral. Data could be from different sources. Understand it, interpret it, then form your opinion. Like I generally say, I'm in Jadeja Europe, I generally say, I am a socialist in my heart, but I have to be a capitalist in my economic classes when I'm teaching at management school. So therefore, how can I give a socialistic view unless otherwise interpret the data in that perspective? Similarly, how can I influence or I can talk about students in management schools, what is the meaning of business and how to do the business irrespective of certain things if I don't understand to take a view from the capitalistic point of view. So the best thing is, first analyze the data that is in front of you, or information, not data, information that is in front of you. Then you form your opinion, and always remember that it is your opinion. Never force your opinion on others. Then only you can give a macro view. You can have a macro view and you will be respected for your macro view. Or you will not be said that, yeah, this is a typical political view. This is to this kind of ideology, that kind of ideology. Like, some of us generally dance when you have a policy coming from a government that we like the government, correct? But after some point of time, find that the policy of that government or that popular government that you have, so it has ruined the micro, small and medium enterprises in the country. But you jumped when the policy was announced because that is your government that you thought of, that your government, your ideological favorite government has done it. Don't do that, because respect that we are all professionals. So if you are professionals, behave professionally. Understand the information, interpret the information neutrally, then have your view and then say, this is my view. Then only, you can have a nice overview of the macroeconomic situations and things like that.
Parag, you're on mute. You
Yeah.
were on mute.
Yeah, I got it. The second question was, like, how do you come to know whether you are a panwala or not?
Yes. So naturally, sir, moment every time you talk about my business, you talk about my business. I only worry about stock return. I'm only worry about stock return. You are a panwala, because there is life beyond stock return. There is life beyond your business. Like if at every point of time I'll talk about, in my profession, in my teaching or my business, then I am a panwala. It's not that I should respect the other people who is my domestic health. Am I not supposed to worry about domestic health? Am I not supposed to worry about the sabjiwala that is there? Am I not supposed to be worried about this one? So therefore, you may influence them, may not influence them. You may help them, you may not help them. But you cannot say, this is the way my business do. This is the way I am only worried about stock return. Then you are a panwala. You don't have a entire macro view about the country or the business or the nation. So that's what you are not supposed to do as a professional or as a 21st century educated citizen of the country. It is expected that we should not be a panwala, because the life beyond your own business, your own return, your own selfish interest. Let's work for the welfare of the society or welfare of the economy.
Yeah, thank you. And Parakram bhai, there is one question for you, is that you invest a lot on the human capital, and you nurture the human capital through in-house sports and other such activity. What do you think of how they generate economic value for you, and what is the you think about human capital in India, and any message for the students?
See, at Jyoti, our mission is to be a propelling technology and prospering life. And life is what? Is a people. Life is the sports, the culture, all other activities, is not just a business. So at Jyoti, we are, let's say we have our own indoor stadiums, the sports ground. The morning when the people are coming over here and enjoying this, while they are going back home, if they are swimming it, they are playing the table tennis, they are playing the basketball, they are playing the something else, while they are going home, they are very happy. End of the day, in a Jyoti, we are looking to be happiness of the people. Business is a part of the life, that's okay, but happiness should not be missed on that. So that's our total mantra, and we are going more and more on these directions and contributing to our society. Let's say if I'm happy, then only I'm able to spread a happiness to others. So
yeah, that's a great message, Parakram bhai. Absolutely, well taken. And I will take only two questions now, 2 or 3 max, and 8 or 5 would be hard close. So from our chairman Chetan Kothari, I guess that we from a high single digit GDP to now minus 24%, and it's worrying. We are talking about a lot on demographic dividend, etc., feel good factors and everything. But now the way state policies, the government acting on fueling growth through very few organization centric policies and stuff like that. What do you see how do you see the growth now? Will it be sustainable and inclusive?
Sir, to whom? To me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, this question is to me. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So let me first put it like this. It is true that Indian economy has contracted for the first time in so many years, or let's say people say 30, 40 years. The Indian economy is contracted by minus 20 or 23%. So this contraction is going to continue for, let's say, year. I mean, if whatever informations are available or data are available, the economy is going to contract, let's say, by 10% in this year. Now, having said that, so naturally next year, whatever growth or whenever the growth will happen, it will be 10 plus something. Then only, even if you are coming to 1%, then you have to first come to the 0, then you have to go to 1. So my view is, yes, economy is contracted. Naturally, there are certain people, a study has already started coming up that certain people are going to will go back to the poverty, because if we are successful in the 2006 to 16 removing 200 people out of poverty line, out of that 45 million people are going to be in the back to the poverty. Yes, that's true. It will happen, and it will be a bad scenario, no doubt about it. For next 2-3 years, it will be a bad scenario. Having said that, let's look at the other side of it, which requires lot of thinking from our side. We managed our life during the lockdown with minimal substance and minimum goods and services consumption, and we see the life how it can be, we can survive, we can sustain minimally. So this is a nice way of telling us, look, Mother Earth has everything for your needs, but Mother Earth has nothing for your greed. So therefore, if we will talk about something like, we will manage with minimum, then, our, environment, everything will be taken care of as we go ahead. So our growth may be slow. Our growth rate may be slow for the next 2 to 3 years. Our target to achieve $5 trillion economy may be a little bit, longer, rather than 2025 may go to 2030. Or for example, our farmers' income may not double in the next 3-4 years. All these things will happen. But imagine a situation when you will go back to a situation, let's say 4, 5, 6 years down the line, will not be much more a, modified growth, where we are much more economical in our consumption. We are much more economical in our, standard of living, and in a way that will reduce some kind of income inequality, that will reduce some kind of, which is more dangerous nowadays, consumption and food inequality. Because income inequality can be tolerated, but can you tolerate in a country like us a consumption and food inequality? And perhaps the pandemic period, lockdown period said us that what is the difference between income inequality and consumption inequality. So I am looking at very positively that going ahead, maybe 4-5 years down the line, our economy might not come back to this 8-9% immediately. So, but at least we will be much more, sustainable, or we will be much more, sustained in our growth. So, and at that point of time, definitely our demographic dividend will play an important role, because all of us will learn to work with a less wage. All of us will also learn to work with a low cost economy. So therefore, these are some of the positives that I think about for Indian economy next 3 to 4 years of time. And of course, needless to mention, corporates also learn how to manage with minimum resources and minimal resources.
Yeah, thank you for those details. Prashant, very quickly, there are a couple of questions now, so we'll just complete this. So one is on the quality. So, when India will manufacture products as good as, Japanese quality, or are we heading towards, Chinese, way of, producing everything in India? So what is your view, and how you see, Indian manufacturers and services, particularly on the quality side of it?
So, as far as India is concerned, there are already certain companies which are able to provide as good a quality as any Japanese company, right? But if you ask India on aggregate, of course, we are very different. We are far away from the Japanese quality. So I think every country takes a natural curve, right? Even Japan, for that matter, in 1950s or 1960s was considered to be a very, very low quality company. It is a low quality country, sorry. It is just recently, in the last 20-30 years, that Japanese quality is known, world over for its extremely high standard. So I think this is just an evolution of any country. You cannot start running without first crawling and then walking, right? So you have to go through that natural progression.
Thank you. The second last question, one is for Rambai. Is India heading towards saving economy or spending economy in terms of corporates?
So if you see, as an individual, if you see, India still has one of the highest saving rate in the world. Okay, but does that same apply for millennials? Perhaps my answer is different. When they come into the core working force, or the middle-age population, the saving habits are altered, and we see that happening around us also. The way the new generation are bold enough to spend, even if at the cost of leveraging themselves. They are ready to, they said, why wait, one life concept, where they want to own everything in just a couple of years itself. So I think that is altering the saving pattern of India. If I have to talk in terms of corporates, they are now being encouraged to spend, at least for the welfare. If you see the government introducing the CSR, wherein the social responsibility has been made mandatory for all the larger corporates and even mid-sized corporates, So yes, corporates are being encouraged to spend for the welfare of the people, especially even if you see this is being demonstrated in these pandemic times also, where corporates are reaching out to their employees, to their people. You have seen hardly any saying that okay, we are laying you off, or we are not you know we are creating even more financial difficulties for you. I think by and large, if you see, barring a few, the corporates have demonstrated that they are spending at least for their people and for the social causes also.
Yes, still there are a few questions, but I think 8:05 we said it's a hard close. So like from my side, I thank Parakram bhai, Prashant bhai, Ram bhai, and Dr. Panda for like immediately accepting this invitation on behalf of RMA, participating wholeheartedly. Maybe like some questions might have misfired, but I think like the audience at large have like got this like lessons learned in last decade in a like very practical way. And like I'm very, very thankful to like RMA team also to allow me to like moderate over here. So thank you very much from my side as well. Over to forum.
Thank you so much. We are very glad to have such amazing speakers this time. Thank you, audience, for being so engaging and asking a lot of questions. We are very sorry to skip few of them. We can take it on the emails. We have emails of our speakers, and we can take that and we can reply you later. I would like to formally close this session with formal vote of thanks by our Honorary Secretary, Paresh Bhai.
Thank you, Forum. On behalf of RMA, we are very much thankful to Parakramsinh, Prashant Bhai, Ram Bhai, and Professor Panda. We are very much grateful that RMA invited you and immediately you accepted the invitation. And Parakramsinh, Prashant Bhai, and Ram Bhai, they are from our home pitch. And they are always positive. Whenever we approach them, they are always positive. Thank you very much for coming in this session. And Professor Panda, actually, you won't believe that today the speakers were so nice and the question answer forum was, very much interesting. That right from our factory, I was driving to home. Half an hour session I attended on the way.
Thank you,
You
sir.
can imagine how interesting the session was. And some of the attendees came from Bhopal, some of them came from Chandigarh. So out of state also, a lot of people attended this. And thank all the persons who have attended this session, all the speakers. And last but not Parag bhai, for the very much impressive moderator. Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rambai.
Thank you.
Thank you. Prashant, bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Parag bhai.
Thank you, everyone.
Everyone.
Thanks, bye. Thanks, Parag bhai.
Thank you all. Thank you.